Nick Maloof here with Maloof Law Group and Maloof Properties and Mercy Business and Financial. I am excited to have with me today Justin Studebaker. Justin does something called an assessment through the context of Working Genius. And Working Genius is a fascinating construct that helps people understand how they operate best in business and how their team does. As a business owner, as a business attorney, as a business broker, this is an invaluable service that I personally have experienced and have personally benefited from. And I'm excited to have Justin with me today.
Thanks for having me, Nick. This is a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Very, very glad to have you. Thank you so much. So tell us, please, what is Working Genius?
Yeah, so it's a cutting-edge new performance tool that measures productivity more than strictly personality. And this is really cutting edge because most of the personality assessments out there are more complex, but they aren't able to really come in and help you with your innovation, to help you with maximizing each employee, to maximize how each person works together within meetings, within projects, within interactions. And so it creates an opportunity for a business owner to have a lens onto their business, onto who they have on their teams, that can really make a difference if you're buying a business, if you're adding new employees, if you're merging people, or you're just trying to maximize the performance of each employee, because it falls into these 3 stages of work. And each person has unique talents either to work more with you on the business or work with you in the business to help you increase innovation, to help create clear strategy, to help communication and inspiration and purpose being pushed out throughout the organization, or really just focusing on tactical execution, really driving results.
Yeah.
And everyone's different in terms of where they fit within these 3 stages of work and where their most value can come out, which many times is misunderstood by most companies because there's a lot of hidden value that the Working Genius uncovers around your employees.
Right. And something you said early on really resonated with me, and that is it's not merely personality.
Yes.
Right? And so many of the tests out there focus on personality, and there is value in understanding elements of that. But when dealing in the business context, it's a matter of how does that personality translate to a person's productivity? What brings them joy in terms of their work? What drags them down? Or what are they merely just competent at, right?
Yes, and you have a ticking time bomb with a lot of your employees because there's these 3 categories, like you said, of geniuses, competencies, and frustrations. Well, if you have employees that are working a majority of their time in their low competencies or their frustrations, they're starting to burn out. And you may just be okay with churning and burning your employees, but most of the time you're going to feel bad about that. And you want people who are sustainable and passionate and purpose-filled of the work they do and that can leave each day feeling like they made an impact.
Yeah.
And this explains that for you and does it in a way that's less complicated so you can actually implement it, where most of the personality ones are too complex for implementation to occur across a company or across a team.
That's really good. And from a business owner's perspective, most of the time you don't want to have the turnover because it's costly from a business perspective too. It's also sad to see people go. You try to bring them in and welcome them to the team, but if they don't work out, then you've got to go find somebody else.
Oh, burnout and turnover, we don't measure those costs as much as we should because, they say it's at the low end 30% of a yearly salary to a high end twice the yearly salary for when you lose those persons. Like we've talked about, like intellectual capital, relationship capital, those relationships that are on the team, what they already know, having to train that person who comes in next, so you're losing the productivity of the trainer, along with the person has to ramp up. All those things have to go into as a factor because it's very, very valuable.
Yeah, that makes great sense. So if I'm understanding correctly, the tool is useful for enabling an owner to truly understand who their employees and what's going to make them motivated and happy with their position, how their job description could be tweaked to make them that much more productive and pleased with their employment situation. It'll enable a buyer of a business to quickly understand and assess the team of employees that they've essentially purchased through the acquisition of the business that they just bought. It'll enable a buyer, an owner of a business who's thinking about selling to identify ways that they might be able to increase value between the time of the assessment and the time of their sale. Lots of different ways that it could be utilized.
100%, and there's a baseline of what you get when you have them take the assessment, and you can do that without me, and it's understandable if you end up doing that. But what you get when you work with somebody like me, was the first group going through certification with the Table Group, has a deep knowledge of all different aspects of the model and how that will apply in ways that you won't get from the baseline assessment, is that we'll actually come in and either go over results with you or put your team through an actual training to build engagement, productivity, cohesiveness, aligning of roles, and understanding of each other and how you can execute together. So yeah, it's a fabulous, and everything you said is totally spot on.
Great, great, great. Well, my experience, like I said earlier, was
Oh,
very
yeah.
positive
Yeah.
in working with you and understanding myself, and
Yeah.
that was a bit of a revelation to me. But I'm curious, do you have other success stories that you wanted to share in regard to other clients that you've worked with?
Yeah, there was a really interesting client recently that it went really well, and it was cool because it helped their employees understand themselves better, and many of them were feeling either starting to get burnt out or not as inspired and engaged in the work and where they were going, and we were able to help them clarify their purpose, what they were doing, where they could go with it. We worked on doing a big whiteboarding session around their strategy. We created a whole nother business line for them that actually they wanted to do, but they were stuck because they were missing certain elements and they
Wow.
weren't leveraging
Yeah, that's
the
great.
talents of a couple of the people. And now you've got a new business line, you've got a couple people who are passionate, excited about these other directions they're going, which is going to increase the bottom line for the company. And everybody understood each other better and how they could work together, and they were putting new team members working in tandem together because they understood now that they had complementary talents that made each of them stronger because they were collaborating more closely.
So again, back to an earlier point, it's not just personality, it's how
Yes.
individual competencies rather, in fact, complement the business at hand, the task at hand, the job description, whatever the person's supposed to be doing. Are they a good fit for it? And is there a way to adjust and mold them or the job description so that everybody's happier and more productive?
100%. And when they are in a position, maybe they're having to leverage their frustrations or low competencies, how are you supporting them in having to be able to fight through those obstacles? So we can also provide some tools and some areas of helping overcome frustrations and things, because every job is a 6-layer job, we call it, which means every job you have to do something in these 6 parts of the working genius. So you can never tell somebody, oh, like, just work in your geniuses. It's like, we want to get you maximizing your fulfillment productivity, but we're also going to help you give you tools to be able to overcome those frustrations, because we're going to face obstacles, we're going to face tough things. How do you reframe those areas so that they're less frustrating for you? So so being able to put them in the right position to be successful, as Jim Collins says, like, put them in the right seat on the bus, so you're making your people have the best shot at thriving and making your business stronger.
Right. You used a term that I think would be beneficial to define, and that is working within your geniuses. What does that mean?
Yeah, Nick, that's a great question. So working within your geniuses means that there are certain things that you're uniquely wired to be able to do at a really high capacity. I've kind of created a 3-part way of looking at it. It's natural talent, it's things that energize you and you get passionate about, you get fulfilled by, and then third is where you have the highest capacity for excellence. Where when you are working in that space, it comes naturally, it's effortless, you're excited about it, you get to go home energized, everybody around you says, oh my gosh, like, how are you doing that? The problem is, and this is the thing that Working Genius does in such a beautiful way, is that it helps you not take for granted the things that you're uniquely gifted in, that then you don't actually weigh into that. You don't actually push into those areas because you're like, oh, I take that for granted. I don't need to do more of that. I just do that so easily. But no, that's your secret sauce. And that's the secret sauce of every company,
Right.
is those things that give you energy, joy, and fulfillment, the areas where you are uniquely gifted to make an impact in that company and help it thrive, is the more you can spend time in those areas of genius.
Right. And so just to use the vernacular, the next step down from that is a competency where you just don't have as much zeal.
Yeah, I look at like love, like, and you could pass on, right?
Okay.
So you love something that's in your geniuses because it's energizing, you're good at it, it's easy, and it's just a great time. Your competencies are things you could have high capability within and be really, really good in that space. For me, that would be what's called enablement. We won't go into all the 6, but that's responding to people's needs, providing high levels of customer service. I worked at Nordstrom for a long time. I got really, really good at that. But for me, it's a low competency. But to other people, they saw me as being a really high level at that. But a competency is something you have high capacity to do, but it doesn't give you energy.
Right.
So it's a slow diminishing return
Yeah.
on those types of activities.
Yeah, and then of course the third tier is just where people just really shouldn't be.
if possible. What I've found is that if you say that, they start to think I shouldn't do that at all, and that's a problem too, because you start to just deflect things. You're like, oh, I'm not doing that because in my job, because that's in my frustration.
Yeah.
So you start to create kind of a crutch and an issue for business owners. So what I say is, you will have to probably do 10 to 20% in your frustrations. So how do you focus on those things that kind of drain you, or you have a higher capacity for output, which there are some really talented people in the world where I've met where their frustrations don't drain them and they're actually still really good at it, but they're going to avoid it over time if they're doing too much of it. So it's just things either avoid or does drain you. But your energy level of doing those things, no matter what, on a ranked level, is going to be markedly lower than your geniuses in particular.
Right, right. And we've talked about how my practice is focused on business and real estate transactional work and supporting them and those folks in a legal context. And this is so relevant to so many of my clients, because if they're business owners, they need to understand themselves and their team. If they're interested in preparing their business for a sale or a liquidity event, they need to understand how to best go about structuring their team for that to work smoothly and to give a buyer confidence. If they're selling or merging or growing through acquisition, then once again, all of those skills and abilities are at the forefront to really be able to do those effectively. Or if they just bought something, they need to know who their new team is, because they don't. You know, they bought a business and they've hired the employees that the previous owner had been utilizing and working with, and they don't know these folks. And they need to develop a relationship and understand how they tick and really welcome them in a way that makes them feel like they want to work with their new boss.
Oh, 100%. And what you were saying is such spot on. The other thing I'd hit on is, like, one of the things we teach, which isn't Working Genius per se, but it's the 5 stages of group development. And because every time you go into those types of dynamics, everything you're describing, you're throwing that group into the forming and storming phase of it, which is always going to be chaotic, right? Sure. Forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning. So Working Genius helps minimize that crazy storming phase, because it's storming because you don't understand each other and you don't have a system and a language and an understanding of each person. And when you can understand that, it moves you past storming into norming and performing faster. Right. And the storming is where things break apart, just like a ship in a bad storm, right?
Sure, sure.
And I loved what you shared about your new law clerk. Like, it was so cool of how the dynamics were going on already, and how you've been able to leverage a little of the knowledge with Working Genius, but also just know where you bring the most value, because you're amazing at, like, strategy and providing counsel and coaching and seeing the big picture for a client, and just helping them work on their business instead of just being in their business. And just your ability to see things from a visionary, from a big picture perspective, is world class. And you understanding that, like, you've had to live in an area that you're good at, but that somebody else could do, and it would free you up to provide this world class value for your clients. And so it's been so cool to see how when we leverage and lean into the right things for us, and we identify and tap into the things that can simplify for us and strengthen our business, that it just creates this effortlessness, or at the very least a streamlined approach to our business that makes everybody enjoy and maximize what they do.
Right. Well, I said before that taking the assessment was a revelation for me.
Yeah.
And it helped me understand what I needed in terms of how I'm to grow in my own business and how I'm to complement those who work with me.
Yeah.
And it also enables me to really understand how I can best serve my clients in those certain capacities, because I really enjoy learning about a client, understanding what they do, helping them discern what's good and what's bad, helping them make good decisions, allowing them to see a vision of what they can accomplish, because oftentimes they're just stuck in the day-to-day. And you mentioned before that Working Genius is something that people can go do an assessment of, on their own, but so many times when folks do that, they do a strategic plan, they do an assessment of this sort, they do Myers-Briggs or anything else, that report, that results just sits on a shelf. But what you're able to bring to the table is an ability to translate it into something that's actually actionable, so that it can be impactful to them and their business.
And thanks for saying that. And
that's what you did for me.
And that's great. And one of the geniuses of these 6 is galvanizing. So galvanizing is the ability to motivate and inspire and help somebody move forward with something, and you need to have that. It's one of the steps of work that wasn't understood in before Working Genius, which is this activation stage.
Right.
And so thankfully that is one of my geniuses. So when I do meet with somebody and they've just misunderstood their results, because many times you'll take certain things the wrong way,
Yeah.
being able to explain it in clear and simple terms and showing them how to use it and move forward with it, it is something that I found that clients have found valuable, because actionable implementation is the hardest thing for adults to do,
Right.
because we don't change easily.
Yeah.
So you have to understand which I have a master's in it, like of behavior change and how behavioral science works to be able to take something and run with it.
Right.
So
Very good.
thanks for sharing that. And this has been great. Like I've really enjoyed this.
Yeah, I've enjoyed the conversation too, and your friendship, as well as your wisdom in regard to the assessment that I underwent, certain members of my team have, and I hope clients engage in as well. So thank you very much for your time as well.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
You too.